If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have told you my life was pretty solid. Great wife, 2 kids, a nice home in the suburbs. I had it all figured out. And last week, that was supposed to be the cherry on top. Laura had planned a family vacation, the kind that makes for perfect Instagram posts and cheesy holiday cards. A rustic cabin by the lake, long hikes through the woods, s'mores by the fire. It sounded like a dream. She even suggested we invite my younger brother, Ryan. It'll be good for him, she said, her hand brushing mine. He's been through so much lately. He could use the fresh air. She wasn't wrong. Ryan had hit a rough patch over the past year. A layoff, a breakup, and the general kind of bad luck that makes people feel like life's punching bag. Couldn't say no. He was my little brother, after all. The cabin was everything Laura had promised. The lake shimmered like glass in the mornings, and the nights were filled with the crackle of the fire pit and the laughter of our kids chasing fireflies. Ryan fit right in, his natural charm making the kids giggle and even earning approving glances from Laura. He should have been perfect, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way Ryan always seemed to be around Laura. I mean, it's not weird for family to bond, right? But there were moments I ignored at the time, when I felt like the third wheel in my own marriage. Like when they'd stand a little too close during the group photos, or when their laughter carried on long after I'd gone to bed. I brushed it off. Ryan was my brother, for God's sake. And Laura? She was the love of my life. There was no way. But then came the last night. The kids were out cold from a day of swimming and running wild. Laura was in the kitchen with Ryan, cleaning up after dinner. I was outside by the fire, nursing a beer and staring at the stars, trying to savor the end of our vacation. I don't know what made me get up and walk toward the cabin. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was something deeper, a nagging voice I couldn't shake. As I approached, I heard their laughter floating through the open window. It wasn't unusual to hear them laugh. Ryan had always been good at making people feel at ease. But this was different. It wasn't the kind of laugh you share with your brother-in-law. It was low, intimate, the kind of laugh reserved for stolen moments. I stopped in my tracks, the firelight flickering behind me. I wanted to go in, to make some joke and break the tension that I wasn't even sure existed. But I didn't. I stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at their shadows moving across the kitchen wall. When I finally forced myself back to the fire, I convinced myself it was nothing. I was tired, overthinking things. It had been a long week. But that night, as Laura slipped into bed beside me, her arm brushing mine, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. The vacation was over. But something had changed, and I didn't know if I could ever get it back. When we got home from the lake, I tried to shake the feeling. Really, I did. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there weren't any. Laura was her usual self. Unpacking suitcases, making the kids' favorite mac and cheese for dinner, laughing at her own bad jokes like she always did. Ryan hung around for a bit too, helping me unload the car and cracking jokes about how I should hire him as my personal porter. It was almost enough to make me forget about the way they'd laughed together in the kitchen that last night. Almost. But then came the little things. The next day, I noticed Laura checking her phone more than usual. She'd glance at it, type something quickly, and then set it face down on the counter. When I walked into the room, she'd flash me a smile like nothing was out of the ordinary. "What's so funny?" I asked at one point, nodding toward her phone. "Just a group chat," she replied casually, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Ryan, meanwhile, had started coming around more often than usual. It wasn't strange for him to stop by. He lived just 20 minutes away, but twice in 1 week felt excessive. The first time, he brought over a six-pack and suggested we watch the game. Felt like old times, and I wanted to believe that's all it was. The second time, he came to drop off a jacket I'd left in his car after the trip. He didn't stay long, just enough time to say hi to the kids and share a quick laugh with Laura in the kitchen before heading out. But even then, I couldn't ignore the way she looked at him, like she was seeing him, really seeing him, in a way I hadn't seen in years. I tried to bury it. I told myself I was imagining things. But late that night, as Laura slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sound of her laughter with Ryan replayed in my mind like a broken record. The next day, I decided I needed to distract myself. I dove into work, burying myself in emails and spreadsheets. But even then, my thoughts kept drifting back to that stupid laugh, to the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at him. And then there was the distance. It wasn't anything obvious, no arguments, no slammed doors. But Laura felt further away. She wasn't pulling away, not exactly, but she wasn't reaching out either. Our conversations felt surface level, like she was always keeping part of herself hidden. "Everything okay?" I asked her one evening as we sat on the couch, the kids upstairs getting ready for bed. She glanced up from her phone, her expression soft but tired. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "You've just seemed a little distracted." She smiled then, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "I'm fine, Jason. Really. Just catching up after being gone all week." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but that nagging voice in my head wouldn't let me. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone where it sat charging on the counter. It would have been so easy to pick it up, to swipe it open and see what secrets it held. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. I told myself I wasn't that kind of husband. I told myself I trusted her. But deep down, I knew that trust was starting to crack. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "You're not imagining this. Something is wrong." The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and unease. On the surface, everything looked fine. Laura was her usual charming self with the kids, joking with me over dinner and even suggesting we watch one of our favorite old movies together one night. But underneath, something felt off. It was the way her phone always seemed to be within arm's reach now. The way she'd hold it close, tilting the screen away from me when a notification came through. Once, I caught her glancing at it with a small smile before quickly locking it when she noticed me watching. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just work stuff," she said, brushing it off. "You know how it is." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Not completely. Then there was Ryan. He'd started dropping by even more often. A casual beer after work. Picking up the kids for an impromptu outing to the arcade. Even offering to help me with some backyard repairs, which he hadn't done in years. It wasn't like him to be this present, this available. One evening, as the kids chased each other around the living room, Ryan leaned against the counter, laughing with Laura over something I didn't catch. They seemed so comfortable together, too comfortable. I couldn't help but notice the way her body angled toward him, how she leaned in just a little too much. I told myself to stop. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were family. But then there was the slip. It happened during dinner one night. We were all seated at the table, me, Laura, the kids, and Ryan, who had invited himself over after just stopping by to drop off some garden tools. The conversation was light, mostly about the kids' day at school, until Ryan made some offhand comment about the lake. "Man, I could really use another trip like that," he said, grinning at Laura. "That was such a good time." Laura's face lit up, but there was something behind her smile, something private. "Yeah, it was." Her voice had a softness to it, almost wistful. I froze mid-bite, my fork hovering over my plate. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way they exchanged a look. A quick glance, barely a second, but enough to send a chill down my spine. "Maybe next time I can actually relax," I joked, forcing a laugh to break the tension I was feeling. Laura laughed too, but it felt forced. "You're always working too hard, Jason. You need to learn how to unwind." Ryan chuckled, taking a sip of his beer. "Maybe I can teach him, huh?" The comment wasn't much, just a throwaway line. But the way he said it, the way Laura smiled faintly at her plate, made me feel like I was on the outside of a joke I didn't understand. After dinner, as Laura tucked the kids into bed and Ryan helped me clean up, I finally found the courage to poke at the edges of my suspicions. "You've been around a lot lately?" I said, keeping my tone casual as I dried a plate. Ryan grinned, his easy charm never faltering. "What can I say? I missed you guys. Plus, your fridge is always stocked better than mine." I smiled, but my chest tightened. Yeah, it's nice having you around, I said, testing the waters. Laura seems to think so too. Ryan's grin didn't waver, but there was a flicker, just the faintest hesitation. She's always been great, he said, shrugging it off. You're lucky to have her, man. Yeah, I replied, setting the plate down harder than I intended. I know. That night, after Ryan left and Laura had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at my reflection in the blank TV screen. Something wasn't right. I could feel it deep in my gut. And as much as I wanted to brush it off, to tell myself I was overthinking, I knew I couldn't let it go. If there was something going on, I needed to know. And for the first time, I thought about taking action. About finding answers, no matter how ugly they might be. The next morning, I woke up early, though it wasn't from a good night's sleep. I'd spent most of the night tossing and turning, haunted by flashes of Laura's faint smile at dinner, the way Ryan had hesitated just a fraction of a second before answering me. They were small things, meaningless on their own, but together they painted a picture I wasn't ready to look at. Laura was still asleep when I slipped out of bed. Her hair was spread across the pillow, her breathing soft and steady. She looked peaceful, content, like someone without a care in the world. And for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. What if I was wrong? What if I was letting paranoia ruin something that was perfectly fine? I shook the thought away. The unease wasn't going to disappear just because I wished it would. After getting the kids ready for school and dropping them off, I found myself at a coffee shop across town. It wasn't a place I usually went to, but that was kind of the point. I needed space to think, somewhere I wouldn't run into anyone who knew me. I sat in the corner with my coffee, staring out the window at people rushing by. My mind was a storm, a million thoughts swirling at once. What if I confronted Laura and was wrong? What if I shattered our marriage over nothing more than a feeling? But what if I was right? The memory of their shared laughter, the subtle looks, the way Laura had been so guarded with her phone lately, it all pointed to something. But I had no proof, just fragments, whispers, shadows. And then there was Ryan, my little brother, the guy who had once looked up to me, who I'd taught to ride a bike and shared late-night beers with after Mom and Dad's divorce. I couldn't imagine him doing something so low, so vile. But the thought wouldn't leave me alone. The line between suspicion and certainty was razor thin, and I was teetering on the edge. I opened my phone and searched for private investigators in the area. The idea felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad movie, but I didn't know where else to turn. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them on my own. One name caught my eye: Michael Travis, a local PI with years of experience and a reputation for discretion. I hesitated for a long moment before tapping the number and hitting call. Travis Investigations, a gruff voice answered after a few rings. Hi, I said, my voice lower than I intended. I need some help. I think my wife, something's not right, and I need to find out what's going on. There was a pause, and then he replied, You've come to the right place. Let's set up a meeting to talk it through. We arranged to meet the next day at his office, and as I hung up, a wave of nausea hit me. This was real now. I was taking steps I couldn't undo, opening a door I might not want to walk through. When I got home later that afternoon, Laura was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. Hey, you're home early, she said, her voice warm and inviting. Good day at work? I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just needed a breather. As I watched her move around the kitchen, laughing when one of the kids came in asking for a snack, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I wanted to believe her smile, to trust the warmth in her voice. But doubt had already taken root, and no amount of charm could pull it out. That night, as Laura curled up next to me in bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd meet with the PI, and whatever he found, whether it confirmed my worst fears or proved me wrong, I'd have to face it. The next day, I found myself sitting in a small, dimly lit office that smelled faintly of stale coffee and worn leather. Michael Travis was exactly what you'd expect a private investigator to look like. Grizzled, with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He didn't bother with small talk, and for that I was grateful. "Start from the beginning," he said, pulling out a battered notebook. I hesitated for a moment, then launched into the story. Our family vacation, the unease that had crept in, the strange interactions between Laura and Ryan. As I spoke, I felt a mix of embarrassment and anger, like I was betraying my wife and brother just by voicing my suspicions. "I don't have proof," I admitted, twisting my wedding ring nervously. "It's just a feeling, but it won't go away." Travis nodded, scribbling in his notebook. "Feelings like this don't usually come out of nowhere," he said. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "I need to know the truth," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "If there's something going on between them, I have to know." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a long moment. "All right," he said finally. "I'll start with your brother. If they're meeting up or communicating in ways they shouldn't be, it'll leave a trail. People are careless that way. But I'll warn you, once we start, there's no going back. You ready for that?" I nodded, though my stomach churned at the thought. "Yeah, I'm ready." We agreed on a plan. Travis would follow Ryan, monitor his movements, and see if there were any signs of him meeting Laura in secret. He'd also look into Laura's activities, discreetly, of course. I didn't want to blow up my marriage if I was wrong. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a message from Laura. "Thinking of you. Love you, Redheart." I stared at the screen, my heart twisting. Was this guilt on her part? Or was I the one doing something wrong by doubting her? That evening, I tried to act normal, but I could tell Laura noticed something was off. She sat across from me at the dinner table, her eyes searching my face as the kids chattered about their day. "Everything okay?" she asked softly once the kids had gone upstairs. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch warm and familiar. "If there's something on your mind, you can tell me, you know?" I wanted to tell her everything right then and there. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to let out the storm that was building inside me. But I couldn't. Not yet. "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'm fine, really." Later that night, I got a text from Travis. "Started tailing Ryan today. Nothing yet, but I'll keep you updated." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. The next few days passed in a haze of forced smiles and growing tension. I went through the motions at work, spent time with the kids, and tried to act like nothing was wrong. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat, wondering if it was Travis with news I wasn't ready to hear. Finally, for days after I'd hired him, Travis called. "You free to talk?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. "Yeah," I said, stepping out into the garage for privacy. "There's something you need to see," he said. "Meet me at my office tomorrow morning. It's about your brother." My heart sank. "What is it?" "I think it's better if I show you," he said. "You'll want to see this for yourself." As I hung up, my hands were trembling. Whatever Travis had found, it was bad enough that he didn't want to explain it over the phone. That night, I barely slept. Laura noticed, of course, but I brushed it off as stress from work. "Maybe we should go out this weekend," she said, brushing her hand across my arm. "Just the two of us. It's been a while." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, that sounds nice." But in my mind, all I could think about was the meeting waiting for me the next morning. Whatever Travis had uncovered, I had a sinking feeling that it would change everything. The next morning, I walked into Travis's office feeling like a man on the edge of a cliff, not sure if I'd jump or be pushed. He greeted me with his usual calm, professional demeanor, motioning for me to sit. "You've got something?" I asked, my voice tight. Travis nodded and pulled a manila folder from his desk. "I've been following your brother, Ryan, for the past few days. He's been pretty predictable: work, gym, a couple of stops at the grocery store. But yesterday, things got interesting." He opened the folder and slid a series of photos across the desk. My stomach twisted as I leaned forward to look. The first photo showed Ryan sitting in his car, parked in a lot I didn't recognize. The timestamp read 3:12 p.m. The next photo was of him entering a coffee shop. Nothing suspicious until the third photo. It was Laura, my Laura, walking into the same coffee shop less than 5 minutes later. I felt the blood drain from my face. "They met," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Travis nodded. They were inside for about an hour. I couldn't get a clear view of their conversation, but I did manage to snap this as they were leaving. He handed me the final photo. It showed Laura and Ryan standing close to each other in the parking lot. Too close. Her hand was on his arm, and the look on her face. It wasn't the look of a sister-in-law. I leaned back in the chair, my mind reeling. "This doesn't prove anything," I said, grasping at straws. "They could have just been talking." Travis shrugged. "Could be. But people don't usually go out of their way to meet in secret if it's just a casual chat." He was right, of course. But I wasn't ready to admit it. Not to him, not to myself. "What do you want to do?" he asked after a moment of silence. "I need more," I said, my voice firm. "Keep digging. I want to know everything. When they're meeting, what they're saying, everything." Travis nodded, slipping the photos back into the folder. "I'll keep an eye on both of them. But I'll warn you, this is already heading into dangerous territory. If you're not ready for what I might find, now's the time to walk away." "I'm not walking away," I said, standing up. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. "I need the truth." As I left his office, the weight of what I'd just seen pressed down on me like a boulder. My mind replayed the images over and over. Laura's hand on Ryan's arm, the way they seemed so close, so comfortable. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself that it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Ryan needed advice, and Laura was helping him. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation that I just wasn't seeing. But when Laura greeted me at the door with a smile and a kiss on the cheek, I couldn't look her in the eye. "How was your morning?" she asked, her voice light. "Fine," I muttered, heading straight to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. That night, I barely spoke during dinner. Laura noticed, of course, but I brushed her off, claiming I was tired from work. "You've been so stressed lately," she said softly after the kids had gone to bed. "I'm worried about you." I forced a smile, even though it felt like my face might crack. "I'm fine," I said. "Just need some sleep." As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. The truth was coming. I could feel it, but I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The following days were a strange dance of pretense and paranoia. Laura went about her routines with the same ease and grace I'd always admired. Making breakfast for the kids, texting me little reminders about errands, and stealing kisses on her way out the door. But every moment felt like a performance, a carefully curated illusion. I couldn't get the photograph out of my head. Laura and Ryan standing too close, her hand on his arm. It haunted me, invading my thoughts at work, during dinner, even as I tried to sleep. Travis continued his investigation, updating me every couple of days. "They've met twice more since the coffee shop," he told me during one call. "Both times at different locations. Short meetings, 30 minutes tops. Always during the day, when you're at work." "What the hell are they talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "I can't say for sure," Travis admitted, "but I managed to record a conversation during their last meeting. I've got the audio for you, but fair warning, it's vague. They're careful not to say too much." He sent the file to my phone, and I listened to it in my car during my lunch break, my heart pounding as their voices filled the small space. "Ryan, you sure he doesn't know anything?" "Laura, I don't think so. He hasn't said anything." "Ryan, we can't keep this up forever." "Laura, I know, just not yet. Okay? I need time to figure things out." My grip on the steering wheel tightened. The words were vague, just as Travis had said, but they carried an unmistakable weight. They weren't talking about something innocent. That much was clear. By the time I got home that evening, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and confusion. Laura greeted me at the door, her smile as warm as ever, but I could barely look at her. Long day? She asked, her tone soft and concerned. Yeah, I muttered, brushing past her. I'm just going to take a shower. Under the hot water, I let myself unravel. My emotions swung wildly between fury and heartbreak. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more. Over the next few days, I started watching her more closely, noting every little thing that seemed off. The way she'd glance at her phone with a small, private smile. The way she seemed distracted at times, her mind somewhere else. Then, one evening, I got another update from Travis. You're not going to like this, he said. Ryan's been keeping something hidden. A second phone. I spotted him using it during one of his lunch breaks, and I managed to get a few photos. He's careful, but it's definitely not his main device. A burner phone? I asked, my stomach twisting. Looks like it, Travis confirmed. And from what I've seen, it's the only phone he uses when he's meeting with your wife. The implications hit me like a truck. Whatever they were hiding, they were being deliberate, calculated, even. I need to know what's on that phone, I said, my voice shaking. I'll see what I can do, Travis promised. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sit next to Laura on the couch. When she asked me what was wrong, I mumbled some excuse about work stress and retreated to the bedroom. I felt like a man drowning, desperately grasping at anything that might keep me afloat. But the more I learned, the deeper I sank. And the worst part? I still wasn't sure if I wanted to know the full truth. A week later, Travis called me with an update that made my stomach drop. I got into the phone, he said simply. I gripped my own phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What did you find? There were messages, he replied, his voice steady but laced with caution. Between your wife and your brother. I'm sending screenshots now. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a notification. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the message, knowing that whatever I was about to see could tear my world apart. But there was no turning back now. The messages were straightforward at first. Casual exchanges about logistics, times, places, excuses. But then they turned darker, more damning. Laura, you can't keep pushing like this, Ryan. If Jason finds out. Ryan, I know, but this is killing me. I hate sneaking around. Laura, we don't have a choice. Not yet. Ryan, how long are we supposed to keep this up? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The words were clear enough to confirm my worst fears, yet vague enough to leave room for doubt. What exactly were they sneaking around about? How deep did this go? There's more, Travis said, his tone heavier now. The messages don't outright say they're having an affair, but I also recovered some photos. Photos. My mouth went dry. I'm sending them now, he said. The first image came through. It was of Laura and Ryan in the same coffee shop as before, sitting close, their heads tilted toward each other. Her hand was on his arm again. The next photo was worse. They were standing by Ryan's car, and this time there was no mistaking the intimacy. His hand rested on her waist, and her face was turned toward him in a way that made my blood boil. But it was the final photo that shattered me. They were at some park bench, and Laura's head was resting on Ryan's shoulder. He had his arm around her, and they looked happy, like a couple in love. Jason, Travis's voice broke through the ringing in my ears. You still with me? Yeah, I croaked, though I barely recognized my own voice. I know this is a lot, he said. Do you want me to keep digging? I swallowed hard, trying to think clearly through the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. They all vied for dominance. Yes, I said finally. Keep digging. I want everything. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the photos on my phone. I didn't even notice the time passing until Laura called, asking when I'd be home for dinner. I'm on my way, I said, my voice hollow. When I walked through the door, Laura greeted me with her usual smile, but I could barely look at her. Every glance, every touch felt like poison, like a wound being reopened over and over again. Everything okay? She asked, tilting her head in concern. Yeah, I lied, brushing past her. Just a long day. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as Laura slept soundly beside me. I wanted to shake her awake, demand answers, scream at her for betraying me. But I knew I couldn't, not yet. I needed more. I needed the truth, the whole truth. And when I had it, I'd make sure they both knew exactly what they'd done to me. I woke up the next morning feeling like a man on the brink of collapse. My mind was a battlefield, with fury, disbelief, and heartbreak tearing through me in waves. The photos, the messages, they confirmed enough, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Laura moved around the kitchen, humming softly as she packed the kids' lunches. She looked so normal, so completely at ease, and it made my stomach turn. How could she act like everything was fine? Like she wasn't hiding a betrayal that could rip our family apart? "Jason, can you grab the juice boxes from the fridge?" she asked, flashing me a smile. I clenched my jaw, nodding as I went to the fridge. My movements felt robotic, my every step weighed down by the knowledge of what I now carried. Once the kids were off to school, Laura turned to me with a curious expression. "Are you okay? You've been so quiet lately." "I'm fine," I said quickly, avoiding her eyes. She tilted her head, studying me. "You don't seem fine. Is something going on at work?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything, laying out the photos, the messages, demanding an explanation. But I wasn't ready. I needed to be absolutely sure. "I'm just tired," I muttered, heading upstairs before she could press me further. In my office, I called Travis. "I need more," I said, my voice hoarse. Travis sighed on the other end. "Jason, I'm not sure how much more there is to find. The messages, the photos, they paint a pretty clear picture. What are you hoping to get?" "I need to know if it's physical," I said, my hands trembling. "I need to know if they've crossed that line." "All right," he said after a pause. "I'll keep digging. But you need to prepare yourself. If I find what you're asking for, it's not going to be easy to hear." "I don't care," I snapped, though the words felt hollow. "Just find it." As the day dragged on, I found myself replaying every moment from the past few months, searching for signs I'd missed. The way Laura's smile lingered when Ryan was around. The inside jokes I didn't understand. The nights when she stayed up late, claiming she had work to catch up on. Each memory felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. That evening, Laura suggested we order takeout and watch a movie with the kids. I forced myself to go along with it, trying to act normal even as my thoughts spiraled. When Ryan's name came up during dinner, our youngest asking if Uncle Ryan could take them to the zoo again, I felt a flash of anger so sharp I had to grip the edge of the table. Laura noticed and reached for my hand. "Jason, are you sure you're okay? You've been so tense lately." I pulled my hand away, offering a weak smile. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind." The rest of the night passed in a blur, but the tension between us was palpable. Laura seemed uneasy, her eyes flicking toward me every so often like she could sense the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Later, as she slept beside me, I stared at her peaceful face and felt a wave of bitterness. How could she sleep so soundly, knowing what she was doing to me? Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Travis. "I've got what you need. Call me in the morning." My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, dread and fury warring inside me. Whatever he'd found, it was the final piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow I would have the truth, and after that there would be no going back. The next morning, I didn't even bother pretending everything was normal. I left the house before Laura woke up, my mind racing as I drove to Travis's office. I felt like a man heading to his own execution, knowing that whatever I was about to hear would change my life forever. Travis greeted me with a grim nod, motioning for me to sit. "I've got it," he said, sliding another manila folder across the desk. I hesitated, staring at the folder as if it might burn me. "What is it?" "It's everything," he said. "Messages, photos, and—" He paused, his voice growing softer. "Confirmation." My stomach dropped. "Just tell me." Travis leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Your wife and your brother have been meeting regularly at a hotel on the edge of town. I've got records, room bookings, timestamps, surveillance footage. There's no mistaking what's been going on. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, the weight of his words crashing down on me like a tidal wave. There's footage, I croaked. He nodded, sliding a USB drive toward me. I don't recommend watching it, but it's here if you need to see for yourself. Couldn't breathe. The truth had been staring me in the face for weeks, but hearing it spoken aloud, knowing there was no more room for doubt, it shattered me. What do you want to do now? Travis asked gently. I don't know. I whispered, my voice raw. I left his office in a daze, the folder and USB drive tucked under my arm like evidence from a crime scene. As I sat in my car, staring blankly at the dashboard, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The storm was over. The truth was out. It was time to act. When I got home, Laura was in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was any other day. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. You're home early, she said. Yeah, I replied, my voice flat. We need to talk. She frowned, setting down her mug. Jason, what's wrong? I didn't say anything. Instead, I pulled the folder from under my arm and dropped it onto the counter between us. Her eyes widened as she flipped it open, her face draining of color as she saw the photos. Jason, she began, but her voice cracked. Don't, I said sharply, my tone colder than I'd ever heard it. Don't you dare try to lie to me. I know everything, Laura. Everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Jason, please, let me explain. Explain what? I snapped. How you've been sneaking around with my brother. How you've been lying to my face, to our kids. Go ahead, Laura. Explain it to me. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't supposed to happen, she choked out. It got out of control. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. You didn't mean to hurt me? Do you even hear yourself? You destroyed our marriage, our family, and for what? Him. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jason, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop. I shook my head, the last shred of love I felt for her crumbling into dust. It's over, Laura. You and me. We're done. I walked out before she could say anything else. I spent the night at a hotel, staring at the ceiling as the weight of what had happened finally settled in. Laura and Ryan had betrayed me in the worst possible way, but as much as it hurt, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them break me. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. I'd lost my wife, my brother, and the life I thought I'd built. But I still had my kids, and they deserved better than this mess. And as for Laura and Ryan, they could have each other. They'd built their relationship on lies and betrayal, and I had no doubt it would crumble under the weight of their guilt. For now, I had to focus on picking up the pieces and building a new life for myself. One without them.